Well, before we start the agenda tonight, I have a sad announcement. Don Costello, lifelong Irvington resident who had over 51 years of service with the Irvington Fire Department, passed away. I actually got a nice little write-up from the fire department, so I'm just going to read it. Donald E. Costello, loving husband, father, and grandpa, passed peacefully on December 18, 2016. Don was 80 years old. A lifelong resident of Irvington, Don was a familiar sight in town, at the post office, the fire department, the history center, the senior center, at the park, up and down Main Street. All were near and dear to him, as Don was also very proud of his service to our country, serving in the Army up in Alaska during the Cold War as he monitored the air and sea activities of the Russians. Don leaves behind his wife of 58 years, Florence, his daughters Pam and Karen, his sons-in-law Bob and David, and grandsons Will, Shaw, and Max. A wake will be held at Edwards Dowdle Funeral Home in Dobbs Ferry on Wednesday, December 21st from 2 to 4 and 7 to 9 p.m. Chapel service will be held at the funeral home on Thursday morning, December 22nd at 10:30 a.m. In lieu of flowers, the family asked that contributions be made to either the Irvington Fire Department or the Irvington History Center. I knew Don very well, and we all knew Florence as well. This was a relatively quick illness. I just found out about it last Wednesday, and then we had the bad news. 51 years doing anything is pretty amazing, but when it's a volunteer position, it's something as thankless as the volunteer fire. That's where I got to know him well. He was the day man, so he was kind of the face of the department for, say, close to a decade. So every little child that came by, he was the one that would, gleefully, greet them and show them around and get a hat and a coloring book. So he did a great job as the ambassador of the village to so many, youngsters and not so youngsters. So there's lots of great memories of Don. He's definitely going to be missed, and I thought maybe we could rise for a moment of silence in his memory of his service to the village, as well as his wife, who was a longtime employee who just retired about a year ago. So, thank you. Well, thank you. You'll be missed, Don. Announcements. First announcements, a public code with respect to solar energy equipment that's scheduled for January 5th, 2017 at 7 p.m. in Village Hall. We started this law, when was that, would you say? It's 6-9 months ago?
Yeah, I was going to say the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so we'll call it 6 months ago. A lot of it came from the ARB decisions. They don't have a lot of guidance, frankly, under the current laws, so they asked for our help. We've been working on our position. There's a little bit of difference on the opinion on the board, but we've been working on this, and I think after the last work session, we felt we were at a point where we could move ahead, even if we weren't 100% in agreement, to hear from the public and see if they agree with how we've come down, which is it's not 100% in favor of solar energy, and it's definitely not against the character of the neighborhood, which is the kind of the two ends of the spectrum. We kind of came down, I'd say, maybe about 2/3 of the way in favor of allowing solar. I think that was overwhelming. 4 of the 5 members of the board felt that was the priority over, potentially negative appearance of the solar arrays. So that's my little bit of history. Mary Ann's going to give an update or a description of the law.
Yeah, I'll explain the law. Actually, Brian, on the purpose, although I'm going to explain the local law before the guidelines, but I think that the guidelines have a statement of purpose that gets at what you were just talking about, that the guidelines are intended to balance the desirability and demand for alternative energy systems with maintaining the aesthetics of the village, to minimize potential for any negative impact by these systems and protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the village. So it really was kind of balancing. So the first part of it, and the thing that the public hearing is on, is a local law that would amend various provisions of the Irvington Code with respect to solar energy equipment. The first change is in the section on the the section of the code on Board of Architectural Review. And it says, this is the way it's being interpreted, but it just clarifies for a building permit for any solar energy equipment has to be approved by the ARB. Again, that's current practice, but this was just stated clearly in the law. Then this provision would be new, that ordinarily ARB approvals don't require notice to neighboring property owners, but this would. So for any application for a building permit for solar energy equipment, notice has to be given to all adjacent property owners. And adjacent property owners are defined as anybody who shares this property line with the subject property, as well as neighbors across the street from any property. Usually, and the reason that ARB applications don't generally get noticed is because anything that has an application before the ARB will virtually site plan approval, but the solar equipment won't require site plan approval. So in order to give the neighbors an
We had to put it in.
opportunity to you know, see what the impact's gonna be on their property, notice has to be given to them. All right. Then this is maybe the heart of it. In reviewing building permits for solar energy equipment, the Board of Architectural Review shall follow the solar energy equipment guidelines adopted by the Board of Trustees. Now, those won't be part of these laws. They'll adopt them separately, at probably whatever meeting will adopt the law. But the reason they're not part of the law is you may find reason to change the guidelines. Technology changes, or you find, you know, that maybe different things should be weighed. So the guidelines could be changed without having to enact a whole local law. Okay, then it also, it does some further defining, and then it lists as accessory uses in all of the districts, the one family district, the business district, all the districts in the village, solar energy equipment, provided it's used only to provide power for the owner's house. So that's what sections 5, 7, 8, and 9 do. So that's in on the local law. Then the guidelines, I already read the principal part of the statement of purpose. And what the guidelines are, and there's not too many of them, I think I'll read them. That all measures should be taken to avoid or mitigate any glare onto neighboring residential property or public rights of way. 2, equipment shall be installed and screened in a manner that minimizes its visibility from surrounding properties and public rights of way while maintaining viability and functional integrity. 3, to the greatest extent practicable, solar energy equipment shall use materials, colors, and textures designed to blend with the structure to which it's affixed. Solar energy equipment may be mounted on a building or any section of the roof of a building, provided it meets these guidelines and complies with the following. That if it's a pitched roof facing a street, the equipment has to be mounted flush, and the plane of the system has to be parallel to the roof surface, and it can't be more than 6 inches above the roof surface. If it's not on the front or facing the street, it can be, however, the only limitation is fully extended. It can't be higher than the ridge of the roof. On a flat roof, the equipment shall not extend above any cornice or parapet. Where there is no cornice or parapet, the equipment shall be set back from the roof edges 4 feet for each foot of solar energy system. They shall be consolidated to one area on the roof to the greatest extent possible and not be scattered in multiple groups on the roof. The equipment is irregular in shape and arranged in a pattern that matches the general shape and configuration of the roof upon which it's mounted, and shall not damage or obscure character-defining features such as dormers, chimney, roof line. When the arrangement of equipment is broken up by a building feature, the equipment shall be arranged symmetrically. Okay, guideline 5. To the maximum extent possible, all solar energy equipment other than the collectors shall be located within the house or on the side or rear of the building. Then there's a set of guidelines for freestanding and ground-mounted solar energy equipment. It shall be located in the side or rear yard only and has to meet the same setbacks that a building would have to. At full extension, it can't be 6.5 feet in height. It shall not exceed 6.5 feet in height above the ground, measured to the highest point on the equipment. It shall be fully screened from adjacent properties by fencing, a combination of evergreen and deciduous plantings, not less than 6.5 feet in height, or through the use of architectural features or screening that will harmonize with the character of the property and the surrounding area. And then any exterior lines have to be buried below the surface of the ground where possible or placed in a conduit. So those are the guidelines that the ARB is to follow. For solar energy equipment, these are the only guidelines that they follow. They won't follow the guidelines.
Right, and so I'll make.
Wait, I'm sorry, Brian. Let me just say one. Two things came up at the work session that I followed up on, or a few things. We did go over these with Ed Marin, and he was comfortable. We had gotten input from the fire department, the police department, Ed Marin, the ARB.
An ARB, yeah.
The ARB. So we had sent it, and it had been also sent to the Green Policy Task Force, but we heard from all those people. Their comments were either incorporated or considered, but two of the ones that were outstanding was one about whether there should be a provision in there about any trees or shrubs that are removed have to be, get a tree removal permit. They were in our first draft ARB regulations, but I talked to Ed Marin, because it's not an ARB thing, it's not for them to enforce the tree law. But I talked to Ed Marin today, and he would make them go, so if a tree were going to be removed, or a protected tree or protected shrub, he would make them go for a permit. But to make it easier for everybody to understand that he's got this, and everybody saw the list of rules, this checklist he has for any solar equipment, and he's going to add to the checklist that about getting tree removal permits if it's required by the code. And then an issue was raised about maintenance, if the things aren't maintained so that they become unsafe or something. And I'd verified that the state building property maintenance code would cover that and would give a village the remedy to take care of it. And I think that addressed the couple of questions that we have from the trustees after the meeting.
Yep, and I was going to discuss it when we have the public hearing. So I'll make a motion to have a public hearing to consider a local law amending the code with respect to solar energy equipment on January 5th, 2017 at 7 p.m. Can I have a second? All in favor? Next announcement, there were two checks over $25,000. The first one was to Tom Bucci Excavating, which was several bills, the largest being related to the Hudson View Park curb replacement and drainage, which we did get some grant money for, but that was $234,669.26. We also had two police vehicles from the capital budget for $57,191. Happy to get that drainage work done, as we discussed in the past. Now we're paying for it. My only other announcement is Hanukkah. It's unique to have Hanukkah so late this year, so I wish everyone happy both, as well as a happy New Year, because we're not going to be meeting again until January 5th. So, any other announcements? Otherwise, we'll move on to correspondence, of which there was none, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Chris Pass was then we're Chris.
Okay, first. Kristen Wall, 58 West Clinton Avenue, and I had not heard about Florence's loss, so I'm a little bit on my heels right now.
Jazz, it's very new to all of us, I think.
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a punch in the gut.
I'll go Wednesday. That's too bad. So anyway, We'll just be bothered by that. But I want to talk obviously about the solar installation legislation. That I just wanted to thank you for working on it. I know it's kind of a beast to tackle, and I think it's really a terrific law and amendment that you've written, and I support it, 100%. I only had one concern that, or it's more like I was wondering that you might be having a problem with the historic district, and that might be causing you to feel like you should incorporate more restrictive language. And I just thought that maybe a solution for that would be to, instead of restricting, the rest of the village, maybe they could include some solar installation guidelines in the design guide and recommendations. And this way we could leave the language that you've already written for the amendment the way it is, just in case you're getting, I don't know if you're getting a lot of correspondence. It was hard to hear the work session.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any yet. The public hearing, maybe we'll get some more, because right now we actually don't have anything special in the historic district. Again, if we have a lot of, objection to that, it might come to that, but as of right now, it's pretty much, it's allowing solar pretty much everywhere. There's some language that says, you can't block historic features, and actually any features, not just historic, but, so, we haven't really carved out the historic district too much from the rest of the village right now.
Okay, and you're not feeling any, you're not getting any feedback from the public to restrict the language of this amendment?
Not yet, but we haven't had the public, comments yet.
I want to get it on the ground floor.
Sure.
So that's great. And then one little tiny thing, just because I got some panels installed a couple years ago. And the part that says where it has to sort of, it sounds like you almost wanted to mimic the roof shape. And like I have a trapezoidal hip roof, as they call it. But my panels are symmetrical, but they don't exactly follow the contours of the roof. But they are symmetrical, and I just wasn't sure if maybe people wanted to kind of make that, I don't know if that's clear or not. But I think they still look, I think they look lovely.
Okay, yeah.
But, so I didn't know if you want to just take a look at that little section and give that a little further thought. But thanks so much for working on it, and happy holidays.
Have you seen the new Tesla ones that they're supposed to come out in 2017?
Well, I heard you talking about them
They're
at
pretty
the work
amazing.
session.
Yeah, check out the website. I know you're a Tesla fan as well as a solar fan, so it's they're revolutionary if they work and if they're affordable. So they could really, our guidelines might almost be not necessary if the Tesla solar panels work.
Well, because they're so attractive, right?
It's almost like they consider the Tesla of roofs, where it looks better than a regular roof and has better insulation, and it's solar. So it's pretty amazing. So check out, there's a pretty cool Elon Musk video.
I'll check that out, although I'm not ready to swap these out
No.
yet. I'm still trying to make my money back on them. And that's the other thing is thanks for doing this legislation at this time of the year, because I know a lot of people are getting ready in the spring and want to start, getting, because a lot of times you have to fortify your roof, so you kind of want to start to get that stuff done now. So it's really great that you're doing it now to give people time to get it done this summer.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you.
And happy holidays.
You too. Consent agenda, which is synonymous with just the minutes of the previous meeting for this month. Do we have any updates, corrections, additions? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Can I have a second? Second. All in favor? Next up is appointment of personnel in the water department. Larry, did you want to kind of give the overview of
Sure. So,
the moving pieces here?
sure. We have a vacancy in the water department, stems from not a retirement, but a resignation back over the summer of an existing employee. And then we had a promotion within the department up to fill that position that was vacated, and it left us with an opening in the water department for a water and sewer maintenance worker grade 2, which is a lower position. We have grade 1 filled already. So the grade 2 position We did canvass a list, a civil service list. There were not enough interested candidates. Actually, there were no interested candidates in this particular job from the list. So allows us to either hire from the outside or promote from within. And we did have a candidate internally that we're recommending for promotion from within, and that's Ray Ross, to the position of water and sewer maintenance worker grade 2. And the salary that's listed there is the salary contained in the union contract, is a union position.
So it's listed as a temporary position?
Yes, it's a little bit of a subtle civil service terminology. Normally, a person like Ray moving into this position would be considered provisional, which means he has to pass the test when it comes up, and he still does have to pass the test, and he knows that. In this case, he's being appointed temporary because the person who just left that position happens to be Ken Mastropietro, who was promoted to grade 1, is not yet permanent in that position.
I see.
So, in theory, if Ken Mastropietro fails to complete his probationary period successfully, which, you know, is always a possibility, but unlikely, he would have the right to roll back, and then Ray would have to roll. It would be like dominoes. Unlikely, but it's a very subtle distinction, and we have to follow the rules.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I'm glad I asked.
and Ray's fully aware of the situation. So,
Any other questions? Resolved to appoint Raymond Ross Jr. to a temporary position of water and sewer maintenance worker grade 2 at an annual salary of $65,616, effective December 20th, 2016, subject to completion of a probationary period of not less than 12 weeks and not more than 52 weeks. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Congrats, Ray. Next up,
Yes.
sorry, appointment of personnel of the Water Department of Public Works.
yes, a related item, as you'd expect. With Ray's promotion into the water department, we are recommending filling Ray's position as a full-time laborer with David Ventura, who happens to be currently a permanent part-time employee in our Public Works Department. We did receive a number of resumes, but you know, David has proven himself over time, and Greg Nielsen is recommending his appointment. There's also a recommendation here for to fill, if you agree with the first appointment, to fill David Ventura's permanent part-time position with Joe Galano. So trying to keep all the positions filled. I think you understand. I think you understand that the Public Works Department is fairly thin, especially this time of year. So we're trying to keep things staffed here. So did I go out of order here? I think I did. Yeah, and then I'm sorry. Then the third on the list here. So that's Joseph Galano filling as a permanent part-timer for David Ventura, and then Anthony Bucari is simply an as-needed driver, has the proper license necessary, can be brought in as necessary for plowing and whatnot. We have a kind of a standby list of people that are used as needed, only when there aren't enough union members available to fill for a particular task.
Questions about these? Resolved to appoint David Ventura to the position of laborer step 1 at an annual salary of $43,274, effective December 20th, 2016, subject to completion of a probationary period of not less than 12 weeks and not more than 52 weeks. And be it further resolved to make the following appointments to the Department of Public Works effective December 20th, 2016. Joseph Galano at a rate of $17 an hour as a part-time laborer, 28 hours per week. Anthony Buccieri at $40 an hour, part-time laborer, driver as needed. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second? Second. All in favor? Next is an approval of an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Greenberg for the East Irvington Fire Protection for 2016. Yeah. Did we need to update that list as well, Larry, or is that just,
I thought that list was appointed already.
I think it might have been, we just added.
We just added one name, yeah.
Yeah, to the back of it.
I think that was done, I'm sorry, let me.
I don't know, it did say I request permission to hire, so.
Oh, I didn't. Temporary help is needed.
Which is, it's kind of our,
No, that's,
One was done.
Yeah, we did that
it
already.
was continuing, because it's a list of familiar
I think
names.
they added Anthony's name.
Yeah, he's up bottom now.
Yeah, the others were done.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, it
Okay,
was
so
probably, it was too much
Freddie, I think,
information
just
for
added
this.
him to the list.
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
So
got
that's
it.
just an updated list all in one place.
Yeah.
So back to the approval of an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Greenberg for East Irvington fire protection for 2016.
Yeah.
So as we end the year, we're getting it under the wire?
Yes. Right, so this is the intermunicipal agreement with the town of Greenberg, which provides for the Irvington Fire Department to cover the unincorporated section of Greenberg known as East Irvington. It's the East Irvington Fire Protection District, which is in Greenberg, and our fire department covers that under contract. This agreement is for calendar year 2016, which is just ending, of course, took this long to get here. Greenberg needs to hold a public hearing on this agreement, which they have scheduled for early January, and then after that, it would be signed and in effect, and the proper payments will be exchanged. Just by way of background, this is authorized under a specific section of general municipal law, but the intermunicipal agreement provides for a payment to the Village of Irvington based upon a formula that's been previously negotiated and is consistent with previous years with Greenberg. Of the payment, which is in the vicinity of $90,000, a little less this year, 35% of that will then be paid over to the Irvington Fire Company as essentially compensation for volunteers going out and covering an area that they're not inherently responsible for except for this agreement. And again, that's all covered by general municipal law and has been the same in the past. We were also invited by Greenberg to submit a draft of the 2017 agreement to try to get both of them taken care of together. And we just sent them a draft very recently today. The hope is that roughly the same time as this one, get it all done at once. So potentially at our next meeting, you'll have a second draft to approve, a 2017 draft to approve. And then that'll take care of, we'll actually be ahead of the game for a change. It's been, we go year to year on this, but we're
I
up to
do
date.
think that I'd like to thank Larry and frankly, the town of Greenberg for keeping these up to date. There had been a period where we're probably about 5 years behind or so, which obviously, so it hurts the fire company, but it also, the Village of Irvington is also out the money for those years. So I appreciate Larry. Larry has to keep prodding. So
It's been cooperative.
it's gotten better the last few years, but
Yeah.
I
I
appreciate
remember
it.
those days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you get like 5 years worth or something. So I appreciate Larry following up, and I appreciate, the town of Greenberg kind of keeping these current.
So Larry, the other 65% that comes to the village is for insurance and...
Well, it's kept in our general fund, so it essentially offsets the percentage of the expenses that we have to run a fire department. So it's roughly 12% of our fire department costs. that we get
Do they
reimbursed.
ask us to do anything that we don't already do for our own fire department as far as...
No, all the same certifications that would be necessary are the same that we have for running our own department.
So the formula is based on road mileage or based on number of habitable, buildings or what?
It's based on a percentage of assessed valuation of the East Irvington section versus East Irvington and Irvington combined as a whole, and then adjusted for the amount of open space that exists in the East Irvington section compared to the Irvington section. So there is a disproportionate amount of open space in East Irvington as compared to
So,
Irvington as a whole.
Does that make it easier or harder to, because it's less dense, so there's less habitation effectively?
Right, and there's brush fires and other things, so rather than debating that every year, there's different ways of taking measure, number of calls, things like that. This formula was decided after much discussion and probably delayed a lot of the past contracts. This year was a way of accounting for the relationship between the assessed valuation in the district, but also adjusting it for this disproportionate amount, which of course the open space doesn't highly in the assessed valuation. It's a much lower number. So,
Well, the reason I'm bringing this up is because you probably do know, if you've driven out Taxter Road, there is a new development going on the east side of Taxter. I think it's called Taxter Court or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a number of houses. So in fact, obviously that won't be in the assessed valuation for at least a year, but it will be in 2018.
Yeah.
So it would be,
When it does,
it'd be factored in. That's all I'm
Yeah.
really interested in.
Yeah, and we're always a year behind. We're doing 2017, this 2017 contract, if we're able to do that soon, that's based on the 2016 assessment roll, which is, it's about a year behind.
So in other words, we'll all be long gone before we see the change in.
I didn't say that.
Hopefully this time this year. No.
So that's
17.
Well, the houses aren't even built yet.
Yeah, that's true.
And
Going in
that,
fast then.
and that formula, that discussion that we talked about, that's a very consistent formula amongst all of the fire protection districts that Greenberg has contracts for. We're not the only one. And so that's why it had been delayed in the past. So we worked out a formula that was consistent and acceptable to all of the fire protection districts, which is no small feat. So,
Which is why it took so long.
yeah,
Excuse me.
exactly. So now things hopefully they just keep rolling along.
And there was a lot of debate too about the open space because
Yeah.
it's, it's easier in some ways that you don't have house fires and there aren't as many people that create fire, but when you do have, there's a couple summers where there's some bad brush fires that.
Where's the fire hydrant?
It's exactly, it's carried on the back.
Yeah.
I've done it a few times, so it was fun. So, again, glad this is all worked out, on a timely basis, and I know the fire department will be happy as well, fire company. So whereas the Village of Irvington and the Town of Greenberg have reached agreement on the provisions of fire protection services for the East Irvington Fire Protection District for the period January 16, 2016 through December 31st, 2016. Whereas the payment due from the Town of Greenberg under said agreement is $88,908 for 2016. Subsequent payment due from the Village of Irvington to the Irvington Fire Company is $31,118 for 2016. Now therefore be it resolved to authorize the mayor to execute an intermunicipal agreement with the Town of Greenberg regarding the East Irvington Fire Protection District, subject to final review by the village attorney. And further resolved to authorize the clerk treasurer upon receipt of payment from the Town of Greenberg to make a payment of $31,118 for 2016 to the Irvington Fire Company in accordance with the terms and conditions of this intermunicipal agreement. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I guess the one thing we didn't ask, maybe you said, and I was off in La La Land, was the fire company is satisfied with the, as far as the terms of it?
Yeah, the terms are all fine. The numbers are really what we focus on. So the terms haven't changed, right?
Okay. So-
Other than any modifications.
And the chief signed it as well, so.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you.
10, approval of intermunicipal agreement with Westchester County for the repository for integrated criminalistic information.
Criminalistic.
Oh,
How did they come up with this name?
It's like unprecedented or trouble.
Unprecedented. Can you spell that?
Precedented.
I don't think I can give you all that much detail about this, other than to say this is a renewal agreement, that our police department is highly involved in exchanging information with Central Repository that Westchester County maintains. And so the police department wishes to continue to be part of that, as you'd expect. The agreement, I believe, was reviewed by Mary Ann, and it's, all the terms of it are acceptable. But don't ask me how it works.
Good old Richie. Is that what's called?
Yeah,
The other thing that sticks out to me is when I read through it, because I read through it, and one thing that's noticeably absent is there's no clause in here about data security or data breach in any sense, or any clause about, there's something about indemnity and responsibility for legal fees, but, it gets constrained for a certain, I think, it sounds like more for non-functioning or something, I don't know what of the system. But, so I know this is like totally, probably a meta level commentary, but it seems like with this kind of information being passed around, we should really have secure systems in place, and not rely upon, the default configurations of Windows servers and whatever else, and expect, yes, this data eventually can be used in courts of law and other places, so parts of it becomes public, but there's other parts that might in fact be sealed or redacted in some way, and we wouldn't want that necessarily getting out into the wrong hands. So I was just going to make a suggestion, which is, would it be possible for someone, it might sound like either the chief or Larry, to query about the data, not to blocking this at all, but just as an informational query about what is the system security, and is it end-to-end, or what kinds of things do they do in terms of ensuring there isn't targets for break-ins and stuff like that, because again, there's a lot of sensitive data in here, and it's not just the village, but it's all the municipalities in Westchester. So,
That'd be
would it be something, I mean, you get my gist of what I'm trying to get at.
Default director of IT can check it. Larry.
Yeah, something.
I'm not trying to find out, for instance, what exactly are they doing, but just a general philosophy, and are they keeping up? And do they have a system in place to actually, well, a lot of places don't, as we found out, have a system in place to actually monitor and detect intrusions while they're happening, as opposed to, we've heard the story about what was going on at the DNC, that what they knew about it. But they had early on notification about intrusions, maybe months before they actually had any internal confirmation. They were able to internally confirm it because they didn't have the systems in place.
Well, you bring up a good point.
That said,
Yeah.
let's just pass the thing.
But I did want for the public's information that under all these many pages that people might not read, there's just one little bit that explains what it's about with a slightly more detail, to allow for the electronic transmission and storage of criminal record and police blotter information. That's what this whole system deals with, it seems, if I got that right from reading the whereas paragraph.
Right, and then it gets into where it does say that it's, it's biometrics, fingerprints, blah, blah,
Right,
blah,
yeah, I
blah,
see that
and,
next. Of those criminal, right.
well,
um,
even people that have just been arrested and accused with the
Arrest,
system,
booking, detention,
they're not necessarily guilty,
right.
and there's, obviously sealed records and all the other kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of, what I would say, sensitive information.
Yes.
I wouldn't want my biometric. I have to get arrested first.
No, I wasn't connecting that to your comment. It was
Just in general.
further on, right.
Yeah.
It's not because of your comment that I brought this up.
It's kind of integrated
Yes,
criminalistic
an integrated,
information.
Yeah.
what it was that this was about. I thought the public might be interested.
Anyway, whereas it is necessary to participate in Westchester County's repository for integrated criminal information system in order to allow for continued use of live scan systems, and whereas the previously approved RICHI agreement will expire on January 31st, 2017, now therefore be it resolved to approve the intermunicipal agreement with Westchester County for continued use of the RICHI system and to authorize the village administrator to execute said agreement. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Next is approval of grant agreement with the New York State Department of State and Thruway Authority.
Okay, so this is a grant agreement involving the Route 9 corridor study. And this is a multi-jurisdictional effort, but Irvington is acting as the central lead agency, so to speak, just handling the paperwork. So the first step is to approve of this agreement from the new New York Bridge Community Benefits Program for $150,000. We are also simultaneously undergoing an RFP process to try to find a consultant to do the study for the entire length of Route 9 from Sleepy Hollow down to Hastings, to study the corridor in ways that it can be made more into a complete street and connect into other modes of transportation, like the planned shared use path across the new New York Bridge. So there's a few different, it's a very interesting study that we'll be part of. And again, this is not all Village of Irvington initiated by any means. In fact, it probably had its origins down in Hastings, but has been extended up to both sides of the new New York Bridge up to Sleepy Hollow. So that's it. This agreement was reviewed by Mary Ann. It's very similar to the other new New York Bridge that Irvington did actually receive for the Town Hall Theater Plaza project. And so it's similar in nature to that.
So 150 is for all of the consultant for this whole thing, not, seems like it would be a gigantic study, but like more than that, but.
We'll see what our
Yeah.
responses our responses are, but I think there was a bit of there were some discussions with consultants, at least one anyway, about this and the scope of what needs to be done and what the expected number was that we'd need in order to do it. And we feel that 150 was right, and that's the grant that we had awarded, and we'll see how the RFP responses come back. But
Then after you study it, then you get it, and then
well,
you do it. That's
just
a
the
whole
study.
other.
Yeah, that'll be a
gigantic
multi-year
number.
effort. Yeah.
I mean, there's no
Well, I think
detailed
it's a very
design docs
worthwhile
there.
thing, it's very critical.
No, but
More than
the study.
worthwhile. Yeah.
Mark's question was whether there are detailed design documents that will come of this, and the answer is, if we can afford it, there'll be some details, but the documents that they will produce, the end result will be in they'll be ready so that design and bid documents could be created from those, from the conceptual plans that are being studied. So that's the goal. But I don't think there's enough money certainly to do the engineering necessary from one end of the corridor to the other. So
Was this revised in some way? I'm trying to look, I thought I read somewhere that there was a revision of this document. I'm just looking to see if I can find it.
The resolutions of the revised grant agreement.
So all the other
that may be-
municipalities are doing the same exact, no, because we're the lead.
We're
I
the
get
lead,
it.
yeah.
Okay, all right, I get
But
it.
you know what, that may be a mistake, so thank you. Yeah, I think it was a carryover from our previous resolution that we used, so.
So you take out the word revised.
Yeah, take out the word revised, thank you.
It didn't say anywhere else it was revised. other
No,
than
this
that
one's
resolution.
not,
Okay.
right.
Good question, Doc.
Thank you.
Good job, Brooke.
Keeping me on
Stepping on my toes, yeah.
But again, this is something that
Eyes out.
we, obviously, it wouldn't make sense to study, where it makes a lot less sense to study complete streets for Route 9 in Irvington alone. So, this is kind of, it's the kind of thing that, I'm happy that, we're willing and able to kind of take the lead on it and push it through. And, but, it has to happen with the state's help and obviously with our fellow municipalities. So this is I think this is one of the most exciting things we've had in a long time, because whether it's safety or environmental friendliness, whatever it is, this is a big component of it, and it's not a huge amount of money, but it definitely can get the discussion started and get some early feasibility. I think we can see how much can actually be done with our old streets that were the old Kings Highway. So
The thing I reflect upon is, complete streets is already pretty much a defined thing, and a style, and a technique, and a philosophy, so, you know, the real important thing is to look up and down the Broadway Corridor itself and find out where the areas are that are having the problems. You know, some data collection would be great, but I'm sure there's gonna be a limit to that because of the cost of that, and so forth. But already some of the, you know, there's already been some modification over the years to, like just the last couple of years, in Hastings, Route 9 went to 3 lanes. From, I guess, Main Street to Dobbs Ferry line or something, right? Something in that area. So changes have been being done. What I like about it is it's kind of a, the fact that it's being done under a New York State New Bridge grant means that the Department of Transportation will probably look a lot more favorably upon whatever comes out of this, rather than it just being one village struggling, you know, like Don Quixote or something.
Sure, and I also think it's gonna be neat if, you know, when we have the pedestrian and bike lanes on the new bridge, that actually have connect to something.
Yeah, you have to go
Yeah.
somewhere. They have to
And, you know,
something has to
yeah,
happen.
And I, you know, I hope that even if we can't do something as large as this, that you can do something from, you know, kind of the aqueduct, you know, to the bridge, because that would, you know, you can really connect. You could then go to Yonkers, at least via bicycle fairly easily, so.
And then you could make the switch over to the rail trail along Sawmill, you know, maybe that's in Hastings where you can connect.
Or at 119.
Or there,
119.
yeah.
Yeah, so
But
it's kind of an interesting, you know, and it's something that I think, you know, 30 years ago, no one would have cared about, but I think it's, you know, in 30 years from now, we might look back and say, I can't believe they didn't do this, so.
Connection at 119 for rail trail. Well, it
I'm sorry, I
connects-
can't hear you.
It connects going, it
Where
connects
the
going
connection is in
south.
Elmsford.
Out of Elmsford.
Yeah, you know where the,
And it's going to eventually connect, I mean, it's
It's
a
right by Nottingham.
disconnect of about a quarter mile right there.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to
Okay.
connect it.
Anyway, back to the task at hand. Resolved to approve the grant agreement with the New York State Thruway Authority to provide $150,000 for the Route 9 Corridor Active Transportation Feasibility Study and Conceptual Design Plan, and further resolved to authorize the village administrator to execute said agreement and any other documents necessary to effectuate the provisions of the grant. I'll make the motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Will the timing of this allow it to feature, be incorporated into our comprehensive planning process? Because we talked about the Route 9 corridor being one of the themes.
Right. I think it's a possibility. They're very close in timing, because this absolutely has to be done by the end of the year, is what we put into our RFP document. The funds for reimbursement from the new New York Bridge project run out in March of 2018. So literally, no, it's not authorized any longer than a certain date in March of 2018. So we have to have this project done by the end of December 2017, which is probably close to where we are with the comprehensive plan. So, look, if there's drafts available, that can be helpful. You know, they can be at least referred to. So,
Approval for a filming permit for Woodbridge Productions, Inc. This happened already.
How'd it go?
No complaints. I didn't receive any complaints. Larry didn't receive any complaints, so I don't know if anyone else complained, but I didn't hear them and Larry didn't hear them, so that's a good start. I drove by it twice that day, and other than seeing, you know, kind of flashing lights, it didn't seem to be too disruptive.
yeah, that company was very professional. So,
Hope it worked out well. I saw people in cool costumes
yeah.
running across Broadway, which is neat.
The complete street there.
Yeah. Resolved to approve the filming permit for Woodbridge Productions for filming at 67 North Broadway on December 13th, 2016, for a permit fee of $1,000. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? On to reports of boards, standing committees, and officers. Trustee liaison reports.
I really don't have a voice right now. I don't have anything except to say that I got a specific letter email from the ECB now that MJ retired from the ECB. The ECB is really enthusiastic, anxious, or whatever, looking for new blood, new folks to be involved with them. So that's the Environmental Conservation Board. They meet once a month. I think it's the last Thursday of the month they meet. And they give direct input to the planning board. So if you're interested, probably contact myself or Larry, and we can tell you more about it, or get you in connection with the chair of the ECB, so you can go to one of their meetings. And that's about it for me.
There was a somewhat subdued senior citizen holiday party, given the information that people found out about Mr. Costello, but there were 90 senior citizens attending. I believe it was Chinese and Italian food, if I remember correctly. Food was amazing.
Really? Chinese?
There's still time to help with the Christmas holiday delivery program. We certainly will need people to wrap, because we always need people to wrap. And there are lots of gifts that have to get wrapped there. Please consider being part of the event, either giving gift cards or, again, helping out. I would also mention I went to my first CAB meeting this past week as liaison to the CAB. And I was very impressed with the turnout, with the involvement of the students, and with the involvement of the adults. Something I'm looking forward to being part of. Bathrooms are closed in the parks. Don't feed the geese. That's it.
The other geese.
That's it.
Watch out for Santa.
I have from Jim in the water department that they've been working and updating the lead and copper system survey for the New York State Health Department, reading water meters, doing winter maintenance on all the water facilities, and they're installing what he calls the Quick Connect fittings on hydrants in the Main Street area and in Legend Hollow. Greg reports, this is the beginning of the winter storm reports. So number one, on 12/11 on Sunday, there was 1 inch and rain. Number two winter storm on 12/17, Saturday, 3 inches sleet and rain. And also in the DPW, they have been rebuilding catch basins on Fargo Lane, sidewalk on Manor Pond Lane at 3 different locations, and they've been installing new signs as per the traffic committee, and they've been cleaning catch basins with the backhaul. And that is the only report I have tonight.
All right.
Nothing from any of my guy.
Okay, fair enough. Village Administrator report.
Just quickly, tomorrow, Marianne, Doug Hahn, and I will be meeting with Mercy College to discuss the possibility of the sidewalk further, try to nail down some additional details, and then hopefully start the conversation more fully with Metro North. So, work in progress.
That's it?
That's it.
Village Clerk Treasurer's report.
The New York State Controller released the tax cap amount last week. The tax cap will be at 1.15%.
Seems low.
That's
So
the
I heard
best
it
it's
was
been, though,
I heard it was
2 years.
1.7 for 2016, so it doesn't make any sense to me, but
It's the window that they look at.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah, it's the highest, though, it's been almost in 2 years.
yeah.
Prior to this was all under 1%.
I'm actually very curious to happen when inflation goes to 4%. I mean, with a 2% tax cap. Because-
That'll be fun.
As you know, there's a lot of moving parts in the budget. One part is medical insurance, and that went up by 12%. So that's going to be a bit of...
Right at the rate of inflation, out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this really marks the start of our budget season, at least for my department, so I'll be hearing back from department heads after the new year. And I can report back as to what we're looking at.
Sounds good. Now it's your turn, sorry.
Attorney's report.
Village attorney's report.
No, just to update the board that, the Macon subdivision, what's going on with it, the preliminary plat was approved and signed by the planning board, at their last meeting, the meeting earlier this month. And, so all that's required now, and there were, they have to get, Department of Health approval before the village, can sign off on the final plan. But they'd already been in touch with Department of Health because there were some issues related to whether septic could be installed there. And they're generally comfortable with it, there was just a couple tweaks. So, so the final plan should be signed, hopefully at the January meeting, but if not after, I'll stand.
Excellent. That was easy.
Does it come back to us for any reason at all, like to help do the septic?
No, I don't think there's any reason. I forget what the agreement's already in place, whether there's some final thing that has to be signed. I don't know. Once the subdivision, the final plat is signed, and then we'll have to enter into that agreement and file it with the county, and then, the board might have to get involved with the sale. But I mean, from here on, it's just dotting i's and crossing t's.
I'm assuming no public comment. Review of action items, Larry?
I didn't note any.
You haven't either.
This the one?
Oh, I'm sorry, the reaching one, yes. of
Sorry.
course. Sorry, I didn't put a star next to that.
The
But yes.
criminalistic investigation.
Yes, I got that.
So I've delivered on my Christmas gift to end before 8 p.m. Well, the public part of the meeting anyway. I will now make a motion to adjourn to executive session regarding volunteer personnel. I've already had a second from Mark. All in favor? Aye. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year.